Hey, this is Andy Bernstein, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
This is Andy's third visit to the show. I love it. I love that we get to exchange these things. I've been talking to a lot of artists lately, trying to understand the world, because I'll dive into the academic side and I'll get the big numbers and all that kind of stuff. And then I'll
Hmm.
talk to the folks who experience things for real. But artists, and that's the category I put you in, you guys see things from different perspectives altogether. We are experiencing a global pandemic,
Hmm.
and it's become politically charged and everything else. But you're getting to do it from a very unique seat. You get to do it from inside the NBA bubble during the finals, and so
Mm.
that's just. I'm dying to know what you think about. And before we say anything else, I want to say this too. We had DJ Severe on, and he's
Uh-huh.
been doing the DJ thing for the Dodgers all season long at Chavez Ravine, and now
Hmm.
he's doing it for in his home stadium, but for American League teams. So
Yeah,
it's just
yeah,
this
yeah.
bonkers, crazy reality. While the Dodgers are in Texas playing in, so what's your take overall on all of this bubble stuff? And I mean, it seems to be working. People aren't getting sick at a rate that we might have thought at one point.
Well, I'm in the safest place in America right now, Pete. I totally am confident of that. The NBA has done an amazing job. All of us staff and players, coaches, team personnel. There hasn't been one case reported that I'm aware of. There have been a couple of cases of the workers here on the Disney property, but they do a really great job of isolating those people right away so that they don't get in contact with us. And again, I think there's only been maybe two of
Right.
those cases, which is also kind of incredible thinking about how many people it takes to put on this monumental effort. Um, this is day 50 for me as we record. I got
Yeah.
here on August 20th. So I'm in the home stretch. We'll see how the finals pan out. The day after the finals end, I get to go home. So, you know, um, I was resigned to be here for the duration for the finals to go 7 games. If that happens, great. If not, I'll be home earlier.
Right. But do you get to go home when it's time, or do you have to go? Like I went on a coast to coast road trip for charity, and I had to go sit in my backyard tent
Mm,
for
really?
5 or 6. Yeah, because I had been all over the nation. I hadn't been in a bubble, so I had to
Mm,
quarantine. So I was home, but I wasn't all the way home. Because you got to do it. You got to do it the right way.
yeah. No, I think coming from this, we don't have to self quarantine at home or isolate or anything. There is the factor of getting onto, going to a municipal and a very busy, you know, public airport, the Orlando airport, and flying
Right.
home on an airplane and getting into LAX. But I'm super well prepared for that. Have my visor, a shield, of course, gloves and mask and the whole thing. And I'll probably lay low, for the first 3, 4, 5, 6 days at home. But thank God I haven't had any symptoms whatsoever, and I don't anticipate having any.
Yeah, I was similar in that I was confident that I wasn't sick at all. If I was going to be sick on this road trip, it was news to me. Like I felt great the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
But still,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to take the precautions. Is it
Yeah.
easy for you to lay low like that for an extended period of time, several 5, 6 days, or whatever, however long it's going to be?
Oh yeah, I can't wait to get home and lay low. My, we have a very comfortable house, nice backyard. The weather's still good in LA. My office is walking distance from my home, and there's no one else there because my staff is not working right now until everybody feels confident about coming back. So people are working from home. So I might go in there, get caught up on some stuff, but I'm not going out in the public. I'm not gonna probably, I'm sure I won't go to the market or restaurant or anything like that until probably at least 5 days in.
Right, right. Just in case stuff.
Hmm.
And then when we last spoke, you were getting ready to enter the bubble, and we
Yeah.
were talking about this whole thing. And we were discussing what you might be able to do now that there's not 30,000 people or at 15 or 20, whatever it is in the capacity in a given
Hmm.
arena, and with
Yeah.
time to set up in one place, what you might
Hmm.
do What did you come up with?
Well, the bubble presented some interesting challenges professionally. We are not permitted to be in close proximity to the players. So all that sort of behind the scenes, fly on the wall type of photography that I'm used to doing throughout my career, I've had to be creative with. So I found little nooks and crannies where I could stick a camera. For example, it's very customary for me to shoot the players from a low angle as they run onto the court, at Staples Center or whatever arena I'm in. I can't be in that position. So I found a spot on the advertising signage that now goes around the court, which we don't usually have, where I could clamp a camera with a fisheye lens, for example, and get that photo of the players coming out, which is cool. And no one else can do that. Even TV can't get that shot. So that was challenging and fun. And then there's another remote angle where I was able to put telephoto basically on the, clamped to the floor practically. It's at the bottom of the stands where people sit, the media sits, but there's nobody in front because there's no courtside fans.
Right.
So there's this void of space. So I have this open space where I could literally stick a camera on a remote and get this kind of cool perspective, low angle corner, which is very reminiscent, by the way, of what I used to do back in the day, where I would have an assistant sit in the corner, where the baseline and the sideline meet.
Yeah.
My assistant would sit there with a Hasselblad with a 250 lens on it, sitting on the floor, aimed up at the basket. So it's kind of the same perspective, same image, which I've missed doing for the last, probably 12, 13 years when we haven't been allowed to do that camera anymore. So that's interesting. And, I'm not shooting on the floor. I'm off the floor, which I was kind of hesitant to embrace at first. But then I realized that I'm kind of above the action here. Instead of being in the action, I'm a little bit above it. So I have a good vantage point. I can see plays happening. I can see alley-oops about to happen. It's a nice vertical shot as well as a horizontal shot. I had to find a creative way to get myself boosted up a little bit so I could go over the advertising board. So it's been a challenge, but a welcome challenge. Anything creative that's challenging to me is fun. And is a problem to solve.
Is there a problem with you? Okay, so when no one's around, I'm imagining you have the run of the place. You can creep and crawl over things. But how long? Like, how do you sanitize? How do you keep things clean? Or is it just you're there at a certain time and no one's there for 6 hours? How does that work?
Well, the saving grace on this whole thing, Pete, has been that we set up our remote cameras, myself and my cohort, Nat Butler. We set up our remote cameras the first day when we got out of quarantine, and they've stayed up, and we haven't moved them. We only moved them once, actually. We had to take them down when the NBA replaced the court from the playoff court that they had and the regular season court to the finals court. But that was just a matter of unclamping things and putting it back once the court was in. But all the equipment has stayed in the arena. We haven't had to pack up anything, take it out, schlep it to another place, check it on an airline. None of that. And that's we kind of look at each other, when we get to the arena and we're all set up, ready to go 15 minutes in, which is kind of, that never happens. I mean, NBA Finals, honestly, I would get to the arena at noon for a 9 o'clock game, quite frankly, 9 p.m. So now we get there about 3:30, 4 o'clock, just to get situated and be ready for the players to arrive, and then shoot that from a socially distant perspective, get some warm-ups and shoot the game. And then, literally 30 minutes after the game, we're back on the bus, back to the hotel.
How does that work? The social distance shooting, are you just running like a laptop and just push and click on and how many cameras are in this setup?
I have 6 remote cameras set up. So in addition to that, what I call the run out camera, that wide angle I told you about, I have 5 others that are my usual setup, except for that one that, I sort of described, that corner angle, which was kind of an augmentation of a different camera that I do usually. Every single camera I have is tethered. So there is an Ethernet port either on the camera or through an adapter that goes through a high-speed line and is transmitted back to an editor in New Jersey. Nat has his own editor in New Jersey. I have my editor in New Jersey at NBA Photos at the headquarters there. And the editor is receiving my photos basically in real time. And in addition to the 6 remotes that I have 2 cameras in front of me that I'm using, one for the pregame and one for the actual game action. So, it's like 9 cameras, sometimes 10 cameras that I'm using. And the editor is responsible for ingesting all of that stuff as it comes in, quickly choosing selects, captioning them, and sending them up to Getty. So Getty Images is pumping out our photos, I wouldn't say in real time, but is as close to live coverage as we can get.
Nice. Are you an NBA employee or are you contracted?
No, I'm a contractor. I'm basically a vendor. I was an employee for a long time. Before that, I was a contractor, and I was an employee, and now I'm back to being a contractor. Yeah.
So they know they love you. They just can't decide where they want to house you.
Yeah. Either way, the workload hasn't stopped. The responsibilities haven't stopped. They still want me at the big events, and that's great. This is my 39th finals, to be honest.
Wow.
Yeah. Tonight is my 212th NBA Finals game. Just NBA Finals.
You've seen all of it.
Going back to 1982. Yeah.
Yeah.
200. I told that to Adam Silver the other day. He looked at me like, "You're kidding." I'm like, "No, it's 200." That night it was 211. So that was 212.
It's remarkable. I mean, you've literally seen every finals game for, a short lifetime,
Yeah. No, it's been a great run. I only missed 3 games in that period in 2008 when the Lakers played Boston, and my daughter was born during the NBA Finals in 2008. I think it's a pretty good excuse to miss the away games, but I did cover the home games. I did cover the LA games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that far for you to go down to the Staples Center,
Yeah. So my wife and my other kids and our infant newborn watched Game 6 from her hospital bed in the hospital, after she had delivered. So that was pretty interesting.
When you look back over this lifetime of just finals, like you have all these moments, you are part of recording it. Like I remember when I can't remember which finals this was, when Jordan goes up, was it finals against the Lakers, where he goes up right hand and switches to the left hand, and it's like an iconic shot. He did the same thing, like either the next shot or the shot prior, where he'd done it. But that shot isn't recorded by history. I don't know if you even recall this, but I'm like, he did it twice. Like,
no, I don't. I don't realize. I don't remember that. That was 91. That was in Chicago Stadium. It was either game. I think it was game 1 or 2. I don't remember, but it was definitely Chicago Stadium. And to be able to capture that in one still photo, guy is changing hands. So, it's a video moment or it's a motor drive moment, but I only get one shot, as and we talked about, one shot every 4 seconds. Just happened to get it where you could kind of see him changing hands, and it was on a pole remote, the stanchion camera, the remote is clamped to the top of the stanchion, right, almost, I guess, the height of his head. So you're looking straight at him, and it was a very profound photo. But I'm glad you brought that up, but I didn't remember that he had done that before or after. Quite honestly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I'm going on memory, so maybe it was a minute before, but he definitely had these 2 remarkable shots in a short succession that were similar in style. And it was weird that here's another moment like this. It's not basketball, but when Madonna gets on stage with Britney and Christina, she kisses both girls, but the one that everybody talks about and remembers is the one with Britney, and it's this weird thing where the moment was bigger, but we just take this slice of it.
Yeah.
Do you have any memories that stand out? Like, I wish I was able to give you this whole thing, but because of the nature of what you do, you only need the one picture.
Oh yeah, a number of times, Pete. Honestly, Michael Jordan taking off from the free throw line, the dunk contest in '88, I think. Yeah. I got a pretty cool picture of it because he had just taken off from the free throw line, so you can. When I shot it horizontal, so you can see, what he was doing. But my other friends had shot motor drive of that, and it's a very cool sequence. So it shows him approaching, then setting up, jumping, the whole thing, and then dunking. So that's cool. I don't really long for motor drive in basketball as much as I would in football, or when I used to shoot baseball, things like track, tennis, things like that, where, you want to get, in tennis especially, you want to get the ball approaching the racket hitting it, the follow through, that kind of thing. Basketball, I'm so trained now, to think in one shot increments. It's funny because Nat and I switch off here. One game, he will shoot on strobes with his primary camera, and then I will shoot on available light and then motor drive. And then the next game, we switch that. And so when it's my turn to shoot available light on motor drive, I end up shooting it on single frame anyway, until I realized, like halfway through the first quarter, I can actually shoot a motor drive sequence of this. I won't blow the strobes because I'm not plugged in. Yeah. And it's a little bit of a change in thinking.
Are you at all worried about COVID in terms of in basketball, and how does that balance with your day-to-day life, COVID? I'm just curious about that, because your life is going to change when you go back home. You won't be in this controlled environment.
Well, you're right. And the answer to your question is yes, I'm concerned about it every second I'm here, because they are making COVID and protection from getting it, to contracting the virus, the number one priority of this experience. And we have to test ourselves with a thermometer and an oxygen thing for your finger every morning. We have to do that on an app. If you don't do it by 11 in the morning, you get an email, hey, you haven't done your self-testing. Then just before I came on with you, I made it a habit before lunch to every single day to go get actual physical testing, where they do the oral and the nasal swab. Every day you get that, and you get that result back that night. We have to wear a little beeper on our credential that if we're too close to another person, the beeper goes off, right? Wow. If that beeper isn't charged, then we get an alert from the powers that be, hey, you're in violation of your beeper nut. Yeah. But this is all to be super careful. Yeah. And the arena is like as sanitized as you can imagine. I mean, there's two levels. There's the green level, which is where we are, the actual playing surface area back of house, and then there's the yellow area, which is a little bit higher up where the other journalists are, but there's no mixing whatsoever. And there's actual plexiglass between us and them, in some of the areas. So, bathrooms are separate, the bus entrances are separate, that kind of thing. So no mingling whatsoever.
Wow. Yeah,
so to answer the other part, of your question, I'm super concerned. I'm super concerned about what I'm seeing, from the White House, and how, he's being so incredibly flippant about it. And, 10,000 people are dead. So if the messaging was any different, maybe, we could get a handle on this thing and turn the corner. I don't think that's going to happen, honestly, before November, the November election. And hopefully people will understand that that his messaging isn't correct. I don't want to get too political on this.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. But you asked, and the answer to that is, I only know what I can do for myself and my family, and what I can expect for the people immediately around me. And I'm not venturing out of that. It's not a bubble, but it's protected, what I feel is a protected area for my family and I.
You had some fantastic interviews, as always, on your show, Legends of Fort.
Thank you.
And the link for everybody is there on Apple. If you guys want to listen to it somewhere else, it's available everywhere. Little LA centric. Is that just because they're there and available in the final? Because you can get anybody, but you've got Michael Cooper, you've got Jack. So who? So is that because they're in the finals? Is that what made that the thing? Or?
No, it's interesting, Pete. Wasn't really planned that way, honestly, but we went into partnership with the LA Times in early July, and we are at the end of a block that we that we agreed to with the LA Times called Restarting the Clock. It's a 16-week block. I think this week is week 13, I believe. And was never really planned, honestly, for it to be LA centric. However, with the Lakers being in it, Michael Cooper being a great friend, as we were planning the later episodes, we want to talk about legendary finals, legendary matchups, legendary rivalries. Coop was there for all of that during Showtime.
Yeah.
So to have him talk about that, to have him, and then, there's a great kind of carry through here with Pat Riley now, and his being the president of the Heat, and of course having guided the Lakers during the Showtime era. So Coop and I spent a lot of time talking about Coach Riley, who we both call Coach Riley, because to us he's still Coach Riley, even though he's on the other team, and I try to be as impartial as I can. This week I have Mark Spears on, who's a tremendous, amazing award-winning journalist. We talk about a lot of stuff. He has a book that is actually dropping today about Spencer Haywood, which is an amazing, amazing book. I mean, and Mark and I had many conversations while I've been here about social justice. He's given me movies to watch, books to read, because I am planning a social justice episode after the bubble is over. So my producer, Veronica, and I are working on getting that content together, and then getting the guests that would be, speak to that. I've also been able to lean on and really embrace the LA Times journalists that are covering this bubble experience. Tanya Ganguly, Andrew Greif. We're going to have Dan Wokey on. Brad Turner was on before the bubble and probably come back. Bill Plaschke. So they have a great roster, of journalists. Yeah. So after the whole thing is over, we'll probably do a round table, myself and some of those journalists who are actually here, and get all of our perspectives about how this bubble went, and all the unique situations involved. So, but people should stay tuned, because, this block will end, and then we're going to go back to our, like they used to say, a regularly scheduled programming.
Yeah.
Still on the LA Times platform, but of course, we can also be found on Apple and Spotify and all the major podcast platforms.
Yeah, and the show is really great. I've been listening to it. Someone like Jerry West is just he's made of the NBA, or the NBA is made of him. It's just to have him on, and you put him under the wisdom category, of course. And just it's fascinating to hear anybody from that era, or even older, like World War II veterans, when they talk about what life was like. And then you put that against the prison that we're going through now. You're like, man, there's a lot to absorb from that wisdom. I'm curious what Ralph Sampson was like, because you have this guy that, I don't want to say he wasn't great, but he was so close to being otherworldly with his greatness, and it just didn't work out. And that happens a lot for NBA guys, because they're giants, and little tiny bones make them not capable anymore like that. Bill Laimbeer.
Well, Ralph was a tremendous guest. I mean, Ralph's history was great. He was probably the most highly recruited player out of high school in his generation, quite frankly. He ended up going to his home university, and University of Virginia. But there was so much hype when he hit the NBA, and he was paired up with Akeem Olajuwon. They became the Twin Towers, and they didn't quite accomplish what they wanted. There was a team called the Lakers that were in the way. They happened to beat the Lakers in '86 on that miraculous shot that Ralph took when the series hung in the balance. He did this flicked shot over his shoulder, went in and eliminated the defending champions, quite frankly. And they went to the NBA Finals that year against the Celtics, and they lost. But Ralph had some nagging injuries. He just never could really. Right. It just didn't click for him in terms of when he was well and 100%, he wasn't with teams that could really go as far as they could, or that he would want to. But a great guest, super involved in the community, giving back, especially in his home state and to his university. And somebody that I didn't really know, honestly, personally, But that's one of the great, and I'm sure you agree with this, Pete,
Oh,
that it's one of the great benefits of doing what we do, is that you get to learn about people that are interesting, and everybody's got a story.
yeah,
And I love uncovering that story. I love finding that one little nugget, of what made them who they are.
yeah.
With
You're one of
Kobe,
my examples of that.
same thing. Yeah,
Be-
thank you.
Because we were talking about your timeline, and then you jumped from East Coast to West Coast, and I was
Yeah,
able to go, wait a second, hold on. You hadn't even seen the billboard yet, and
right.
I'm like, why the hell are you in LA all of a sudden? You're like, oh, by the way,
Yeah. Well, I did come for the weather, and that's partially true. But
yeah,
things work out the way they're supposed
yeah,
to. And I truly believe that. I made some critical decisions. The decision to move from where I was, and I was happy, and I had friends. I was fulfilled. I was close to family at the University of Massachusetts. To pull up stakes and move to California,
yeah,
that was a big move. But something inside me said, look, if you're going to get serious about this craft, and make it a career, which it was starting to bud in my mind that was going to be my career. I just had to step up the game. I had to step up where I was going to receive the knowledge and the opportunity. And luckily, our center provided that, not as much through the curriculum, quite frankly, but through, and we talked about this before, but two teachers who mentored me and continue to mentor me, but also introduced me to Sports Illustrated photographers who took me under their wing. I learned the technique of lighting arenas and with strobes, which was a very specialized technique, still is. And then, through my sort of moxie Brooklyn-y thing, I was able to, stick my foot in the door and
yeah.
meet people in key situations.
And then you just went ahead and moved in.
Yeah, right. I did. I moved in. I actually did move in.
What? So one of the things I learned, and I'll give credit to Jordan Harbinger, who's a great podcaster,
Yeah.
to as much as possible, or when only by design, use ego in my questions. Like, I'm desperate to ask you what you think about the greatest player of all time. We're not going to go down that road.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's a great conversation, but it satisfies what I want. But I've learned that there are so many other questions out there that if I wait and let my brain percolate, I'll find that better thing. What have you learned about interviewing? So you do it because you're talking to people that have done tens of thousands of interviews by the time they get to you, and
Yeah.
that's not an easy
Yeah.
chore.
No, it's not my, not my first love. I mean, it wasn't what I was born to do. You're not talking to like Mike Breen or,
Yeah,
or Bob Costas or somebody. They were born to do this.
right.
I'm amazed. I watch Rachel Nichols every day here. She's doing the jump live, and it's so natural for her. And I kind of harken back to when I started doing this show on the Laker Network called Through the Lens. It's a show that I created where I sit on a set with a Laker personality. It could be Jeannie Buss, could be Phil Jackson, Gary Beatty, James Worthy, whoever, and we talk about their career through my photos. Because I pretty much photographed these guys, their whole Laker career or their whole life with the Lakers. And I was super nervous before, and it's taped, so it's not like it's live. And the producer, this woman Marina, who was amazing, she just looked at me. She said, "Andy," she said, "you know these guys, right? You know these people." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, but I'm super nervous." She said, "Well, forget about the camera. Just make believe you're in your living room, you're having a conversation, and just go with it like that. Forget about all the rest of us. If something major happens, we'll redo it." And that's kind of the attitude I've had, honestly. Haven't had to do any redos per se. But when I have somebody like in this situation that we're in, I just, have a script and we're very well prepared. My researcher, my producer, Veronica, does incredible research. I actually have a script written out in terms of what I want to talk about, because the last thing you want to do is end the interview and say, "Oh, damn, I didn't talk about that,"
Yeah, yeah.
And I find that the flow is, I feel like people really like to talk about, they don't want to talk about their accolades. They don't want to talk about all the
Right.
stuff that everybody talks about. They want to talk about like who influenced them, where did that spark come from? I remember I was talking to Kirk Gibson. I don't know if you and I talked about this before, but Kirk is a pretty gruff guy, to say the least. And he wasn't very forthcoming, and it was a major, like, Herculean effort just to get him, on the podcast to call in. And it was kind of a one-word answers at the beginning, and then we started talking about why he became a baseball player.
Yeah.
And he said, "You know what?" He said, "I wasn't supposed to be a baseball player." We went into this whole thing about how he's an all-American football player at Michigan State. He was destined for the NFL, first-round draft pick, the whole thing. And his football coach actually said that he thought that he was going to have a longer career as a baseball player. He was a great baseball player in college, but his love was for football. And he said, "You know what? I listened to him, and look what happened." So people like to uncover those things. I remember talking to Nancy Lieberman, for example, who's amazing. People don't know about Nancy Lieberman. She is like literally the first head on the Mount Rushmore of women's basketball. And she talked about how there was nothing to aspire to past being on the Olympic team when she was in high school for women's basketball players. So she would go from Queens on the train, like at 14, 15, 16 years old. She'd take the subway. She wouldn't tell her mom, to Rucker Park in Harlem and play against the guys. And the only girl there, And then the guys were so enthralled with her that they would literally escort her back on the train to her home, to her place in Queens, And her mom would say, "Well, where you been all day?" And she, "Oh, I was studying somewhere." But these are like stories, people's stories that are so inspiring to me. And also, when people talk about their foundations and why they are involved in certain causes, certain charities, I always want to promote that, but I find it incredibly interesting why these particular charities or foundations or causes, Kevin Love, for example, with mental health. And, we all know about Kevin coming forward, but we don't really know what his foundation does. I mean, he's got a foundation, but, I don't think anyone ever really asked him, what do you actually do with the foundation? So we talked about that. And then we're able to, pump that out and promote it on our social media, and the guests appreciate that. So, it's a win-win situation for me. I love doing it.
Yeah, it is win-win, and you're right. You get to create these relationships, even if it's professional or in passing. You begin to know people, and because you share time together, you get to explore those things, and you get to ask that question of Kirk Gibson that you always wanted to ask. And so we had Andy Summers on the show from the Police, and what he does not want to talk about, and he's kind of, I wouldn't say he's gruff, but he's a hard nut.
Yeah, I heard.
And he doesn't want to talk about being in the Police. Like, that was 40 years ago,
Yeah.
They've had a couple of comeback. He doesn't care about that. He's made all that money already, And so when you introduce him, you don't say, we try not to mention the Police at all. We try to just say he's a photographer, he's a musician, he's a multimedia artist. What are you working on now? And he's like, lights up. And he's like, "Oh, I'm a better guitar player than I've ever been. I love taking pictures. I've always taken," and then he brings the Police up in his own context.
Yeah.
And we've got this fantastic interview because we didn't say, "When are you guys getting back together?"
Right. Those are the obvious questions. And those are that's what makes those people bristle, Like, for example, if I was going to have Randy Johnson on, I'm trying to get Randy Johnson, Cy Young Award Hall of Famer pitcher, of course. I mean, you can't not mention that. But I want to talk about his photography love and like why he would carry a camera around, what kind of stuff he would shoot. We all know he's like one of the greatest pitchers of all time. And unless you're interviewing him specifically about an anniversary of something or whatever, the guy's going into the Hall of Fame, I don't really want to dwell too much on his career. I want to relate it to what I think is interesting and what my audience thinks is interesting, and why my audience is listening to my podcast when they could listen to 900 other ones with Randy Johnson when he's talking about being a great pitcher.
Right.
So I think, when I had Peter Guber on, for example, Peter, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about sports, honestly. We talked about how he started. We talked about the bridge between entertainment and sports, what his mission is, the fan experience, all of that stuff. I mean, yeah, of course, the guy owns the Dodgers. He owns the Warriors. He's a mogul in sports, but that wasn't really the the full crux of the interview that I did with him. And I think he appreciated it, because he could have gone on for like 2 hours, and it was a great conversation.
Yeah, no, you're right. And then there are funny jokes, like you want to ask Randy, "Hey, is Walnut Creek big enough for you and Marky Post to both be famous?" Like, you know, just those kind of silly
Right.
things like that.
Yeah.
Because it's just a silly thing, but sometimes those silly things get them talking. You're like, "Oh, you know what? Actually, I dated her sister," and all of a sudden you're like, "See, I didn't know that was going to happen." These
Yeah,
things.
right. Yeah, speaking of Randy Johnson, have you had John Suhu on your show yet?
No.
My good. All right. Well, I have to connect you with John, because John
Okay.
is the longtime Dodgers photographer.
Yeah.
So John started off with me as my assistant back in 1984 or 5, and has been with the Dodgers ever since. I mean, now he's in his 36th year, I think, with the Dodgers. We're still great friends, but John was the photo editor at the Daily Trojan at USC when Randy Johnson was at USC, and worked for John on his staff at the Daily Trojan as a photographer. So that's a great story that John and I actually talked about on my podcast, because I did a legendary photographers series, and he was, of course, part of that. But I think you would really enjoy it. And he's one of the rare people in our business that has been able to still stay incredibly humble. He's so beloved by that organization, and we had a great run together until it was time for him to take over the Dodgers, and I kind of moved this way with my NBA career and the other things I was doing, and we stayed great friends. I mean, from the minute we met until today, we text each other probably 3, 4, 5 times a day, especially now that he's with the Dodgers in their bubble situation, playoffs, and I'm doing my thing.
These moments also allow you to bring up lifelong questions. Like, I've always wanted to bring this up, and this kind of goes back to how we opened the show. And I'm going to go back to Kirk Gibson. Depending on which broadcast you saw, when Gibson comes out, they got to do something, like, so they put a graphic up and they say, 2 out of the last 4 at bats for Kirk Gibson were home runs. Because in '84, he closes out the series with 3 for 4 with 2 home runs.
Right.
3 runs scored. And so his last 2 games in the World Series, he was 4 for 5 with 3 home runs and 4 runs scored, And so it's just remarkable. But that isn't part of the memory of Kirk, because he hit a different gear when he hit that home run, and basically couldn't play baseball very well for the next 2 years. Yeah, he played, but his body was just destroyed,
No, it was like, out of The Natural. I mean, the movie with Robert Redford. I mean, you couldn't write. It was the most storybook thing. And I've talked about this before, maybe with you, we talked about, I had never heard a stadium, an arena as loud as and for a prolonged period of time that I heard Dodger Stadium. I was like, I was doing my job, but it was so loud that I felt like the second and third deck were just going to crack off. People were just going out of their minds. And, I've been in, Super Bowls, I've been at Olympics, NBA finals, whatever. But that was just such an incredible moment. And, you just have that image in your mind of Dennis Eckersley just walking off the field, just mortified.
And as a photographer, is that where you're watching? Is that where the story is?
No, dude, I was running. I wasn't watching. No, this is all stuff I saw afterwards, on TV. But if you see the tape of that, there's this great angle from the press box that shows the Dodger, the Dodger dugout and third baseline erupting, and Tommy Lasorda jumping up. Right, I'm actually the first guy out. I was
you told me this. Yes, I remember. You told me this.
I got to home plate before everybody else, and got Kirk high-fiving Oral Hershiser. Ended up as the cover of Sporting News that week, and there's a great video somebody has sent me. You can see the whole thing happening, and it's very similar to what I do at the end of the NBA Finals. Won't happen at this NBA Finals because they're going to keep us sort of back. But normally I would, be the first guy to the star player and just stay with him the rest of the night.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
One more real quick note about that moment in '88. Yeah, Eckersley walks off, and
Yeah.
gets to still win a World Series and everything, and Kirk Gibson, does his thing. But there's also the call from Vin Scully and Jack Brickhouse and everybody else, but Vin Scully in particular literally
Yeah.
says basically nothing. He's like, in a year that has been impossible, the improbable just happened, and then he shuts up again. And so for like
Yeah.
3 minutes, there's just nothing being said except for that crazy crowd just going bananas. And when you
Yeah.
put all
Yeah.
these things together with the one other piece, when it's 3-2, you see
Hmm.
Gibson step out, and then almost like a thought bubble in his head, 3-2 backdoor slider. That's what the scouting report is. And he gets back in and just kind of just hams that bat
Yeah.
out there. And
Crazy.
it's just an
Yeah.
insane story. And we're fortunate
Yeah.
in that in this era we can capture all of these things in micro detail, like, not just with cameras and everything else, not just the all of it. It's such a neat thing. What's
Yeah.
in the future technology wise that you're excited about to make your job even? I mean, because obviously it's grown from you just sitting there having to push a button and use your thumb to advance, all that stuff.
Well, yeah, I was not the biggest fan of the digital revolution. Still don't particularly love it, quite honestly.
Yeah.
I miss the tangible feel, the tangibleness of holding a piece of film and knowing I created that. Um, but like everything else, I've had to kind of adapt.
Yeah.
I think more of this live coverage is going to be improved upon. That we could probably transmit even faster than we are now, which is kind of mind blowing if you think about it, but it's still pretty quick. And then I'm not sure what the future holds. There's some robotic stuff that kind of intrigues me that I saw that Nikon kind of put out some information recently I want to learn about. Yeah, I see what the TV guys do with the RoboCams. I think
Yeah.
they have, I don't want to say the wrong number, but I think they have like about 60 RoboCams set up for the NBA Finals.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing about, being safe and having less staff is that where they would normally have a person, they have put a C-stand with a RoboCam on it, or put it on a railing or ceiling or something. So everywhere you go in the arena, there's a RoboCam, which is kind of interesting. So, I'm up for anything. VR interests me, VR and the still side. I want to see what the future of that is, if there is a future.
Right.
I fooled around with that a little bit with our videographer that helps us at Legends of Sport. We're developing right now, working on a project with the creator of the KobeMural.com site, Mike Asner, where Mike has tracked every Kobe and Gigi mural throughout the world, actually. I think right now there's 500-600 of them. And we are interviewing artists and photographers. If there's a photograph that has inspired the mural, the property owner, if it's on a store or an apartment building or whatever, trying to get those stories, of behind the scenes stories of these incredible muralists and the love that everyone has for Kobe and Gigi, and how they've sort of channeled grief into creative energy, and also to keep his legacy going. And that's part of my mission too, moving forward after our book, and keeping the book, out there to the public and available, and doing Mamba Mentality seminars and talks. And I owe so much to him, and I want to keep the conversation going. I don't want him to become a mythical figure. Honestly, I want his legacy to be very much at the front of what people think about all the time. His message about work and life and obsession and never settling, for second best. All of those are very, very important. And not only in sports, of course, in sports, but in life and parenting, and it's very important to me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that, because it's one of the things I wanted to bring up a little bit, because so Kobe dies 5 days later. The president says, "Hey, we're not traveling to China. They're not traveling here," and we're like, "Wait, this thing is real?" Like this isn't just, some small thing.
Yeah.
And so literally there was no room left to do much remembering or, I mean, yeah, I know like we did our best with what we had, but
Hmm.
we had bigger business to tend to. So it is important to keep what he did. By the way, if you're looking on the screen, that's the link to Mamba Mentality. It is a
Oh,
gorgeous book.
thank you.
You take Andy's digital photography, his photography work, and then you put it next to the words that Kobe put together, and you've got yourself a gorgeous book. I've got a copy. Definitely get that if you're at all interested in basketball, photography, those kind of things.
Well, thank you, Pete. Yeah, it's become a worldwide bestseller. It's in over 20 countries now, 20 languages. It's on the New York Times bestseller list for 18, 20 weeks. I mean, it's a real testament to how loved he not only say was, he is, and continues to be. And the book is accomplishing what he set out to accomplish when we did it, was to be, from his words, a teaching tool about the tenets and the statutes of Mamba mentality, quite frankly.
Yeah, yeah. It's Bono talks about singing a song like what's the last song you would sing if you were able to
Hmm.
know that, and this
Yeah.
book is a pretty good last song. I mean, it's an incredible. I went through and I read it after he passed, and I thought this is just if it has to be this early that you
Hmm.
go, then
Hmm.
I've done this and I got it done. I mean, what if it had happened 6 months earlier? And like, I don't know how far the book was from being done, but
Mm.
you know,
Yeah, yeah. Well, we released the book in October 2018,
right,
and it was very successful, of course, at first, because it's Kobe telling his own story. It's not
right.
somebody else telling Kobe's story, and it's our collaboration together. And
Hmm.
we were very happy with the book. But when he suddenly died, it took on a whole other perspective, a whole other meaning, because, like I said, it's from his words. He wrote every word in the book.
Hmm.
Uh, so it's not like you see so many athletes do, as told to kind of stories, or somebody's doing a biography about them.
Right.
And also, quite frankly, as a photographer, you don't see very many projects, especially books, where the photographer and the subject, it could be the Rolling Stones, it could be, another athlete, doesn't matter, where there's such a connection between the two. I mean, I was with him every step of the way, from his first day as a Laker to his last day, 20 years. So one athlete in one city for an entire Hall of Fame career, shot by one photographer. I mean, I don't think that really happens very often,
It does not.
in anything, in any genre. So it's very, very, very special for me as a photographer and documentarian, to be able to produce a product like this that both of us were very, very proud of.
Yeah, it's an incredible work. When you look back over your career, are there players that are just better subjects than others? Like where they're able to communicate, whatever it is, and they're obviously not trying to, but
Hmm.
you're just able to capture it from them more. And who are they?
Well, I mean, the first guy that comes to mind, of course, is Magic. I mean, Magic kind of spoiled me, honestly, because he was so easy to work with. He knew how to kick it in, he knew how to flash that smile. Whatever you needed him to do, he was incredibly well. You could direct him, he was respectful, a great friend, still is. And then there's been, guys that are challenging. Kirk Gibson was not the easiest guy to be around. I was always on
Yeah.
pins and needles when I worked for the Dodgers around him. Kareem had a side of him that you just wanted to be very careful, not to kind of distract him, or, because a lot of what I do is behind the scenes, and he was,
Hmm.
a very private guy. But I've never had an experience that was downright negative, like bad. Like, I can't tell you there's ever a bad guy or a bad
Well, what's the
photo
other end of
shoot.
it? And then in game, like if you're like,
Yeah.
all I have to do is get my lens on Michael Jordan in the moment, and the picture will be great. Like who are the great
Yeah.
subjects when there's no preparation? It's just perspiration and time, and here's the shot.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Michael Jordan, of course. Yeah, definitely. I mean, Kobe top of the list for me.
Right.
Shaq was like that. LeBron is like that. Now I have LeBron in front of me, all the time. But
Ridiculous.
but for this first 15 years he played in the East, I didn't, I saw him obviously, and I shot all the finals and the All-Star games and a lot of his games during the regular season, but it wasn't a regular thing for me. And you would pray when you get to a game that he would do something for you, that, that you'd get something. And there were games when not just him, but other guys you just wouldn't get. But I remember like Isaiah Thomas, Dominique Wilkins, Barkley. I mean, these were guys, James Worthy, of course. These were guys who, unless you were in a coma, you would definitely come away with a few pictures from a game from those guys, because they were just incredible, amazing athletes, but so beautiful to photograph.
Yeah, yeah. Do you like the era when they had the silky uniforms? Like in the 50s. You wish they brought that back?
I think somebody tried to do that. One of the teams, I forget which one, maybe it was Indiana or Dallas or something. I mean, it kind of wreaks havoc with the strobe, because you get these like highlights that come off, and it's like shiny, like Mylar, I kind of like somewhere in between the short shorts and like the Iverson shorts. I like that sort of balance.
Or Walt Williams, who had on shorts that were so long and socks that were so high. It was as if he was wearing like gauchos or something.
Yeah, exactly. But I really love these black Mamba uniforms that the Lakers are wearing during the finals. And those are really cool. If you get a really close up look at them, and they're almost impossible to photograph because they're just so dark and eat up all the light. But I was able to shoot them in the locker room, and they have like the snake skin throughout the fabric. It's super cool. It's very, very interesting how they did that.
Yeah, uniforms have gotten cool. The Ducks and all their variations, and just I think it's not only great for marketing. It's cool to look at. Actually, in less than 10 minutes, I'm going to have Jeff Pearlman on, and he.
Oh wow, great!
Yeah, he just dropped his book about the 3-ring circus.
Yeah.
Jack, and I can't wait to talk to him about that, because
well, tell him I say hi, because he reached out to me about the book when he was first starting. So I wish him the best of luck with that.
Yeah. So we're gonna wrap this real quick, but that you got mega alphas, and then you have this Zen master trying to like get these alphas to do what they need to do, and Phil can do it, because Phil was able to manage, Michael and Dennis and all that. So he knows how to do it, but it is a circus, and it's fun, and it's so neat that you get to be around this stuff and capture it for us, man. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Pete. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to chat with you and your audience, because I always enjoy talking to you, because not only are you, well versed in photography, but you're a big sports nut and fan like I am. So we have great conversations. I look forward to the next time, and thank you for giving some information out about the book, about the podcast. The podcast is not only, I should mention, is not only on audio through the LA Times, Spotify, Apple, whatever, but we also are releasing the full podcast now in our 3rd season on video on our YouTube channel, which is Legends of Sport. So you can actually watch, like we're doing now. You can watch the entire thing if you prefer to do that rather than listen, or in addition to listening, whatever.
I'll put a link for that in the show notes for everybody who's watching now. I'll throw that
awesome.
up. Yeah, man, this has been great. Thank you so much. Let me push these buttons here. Stand by.